Continuing on with our lecture here, so what we see here now is about the joints. So what do we mean about the joints? So this is now where you would see the articulation of two bones, or in other words, this is where now you would see where two bones are actually going to come in contact with each other. And of course, that would be known as your articulation. So there's one over here, for example, on the shoulder. There's one over here for the knee, and then there's one over here for the elbow. So articulations or joints specifically now is where bones will come together. They have classifications here as well. So these are the different types of joint classifications: fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial joints. So we will discuss this as we go on in much detail with our lecture here. So fibrous joints right over here, these are going to be mostly immovable. So they don't actually move. An example of that would be sutures that are found in the cranial bone. So try to recall when we are talking about the bones that you have sutures there where two bones comes in contact. So for example, if this side over here would be the right parietal bone, okay? So this is the right parietal bone, for example, and then this right parietal bone right over here is going to be in contact, or it will articulate with the with the left parietal bone. So this now becomes the suture, and this becomes a type of a joint which is not going to move, or an immovable joint. And this is now classified as your fibrous joint. Cartilaginous joints, on the other hand here, they are connected by a cartilage. So cartilaginous, cartilage. Think about it. Okay, think about it in that perspective. So these bones have a connection between them that is formed by a cartilage, and specifically on cartilaginous joints, these are now your hyaline cartilage. Okay, an example of this would be the costal cartilages. So remember the ribs. So if this is the ribs over here, this is our sternum, for example, right over here, and then you have the costal cartilage right over here. So this would be the costal cartilage that is connecting the ribs to our sternum. So again, try to recall when we were talking about this the thoracic cage from the previous lectures. So that is your cartilaginous joints, and then the other one over here is your fibrocartilage. So fibrocartilage, so think of it, this is now going to be your type of fibrous or fibrocartilage, a type of fibrous joints. So classification of a joint, fibrous joints. This is an example here, fibrocartilage. So again, this is another type of cartilage here that is going to be connecting two bones, and this is now going to be found in your intervertebral discs. And oftentimes, these becomes slightly movable. Okay, so that is the different classification of joints over there. And then the most movable of them all, and which our topic is going to be concentrating on, is going to be the synovial joints. So what are the synovial joints here? So synovial joints, these are not the freely movable joints. So for example, your shoulder, right? You can move your shoulder left, right, forward, backwards, and so on and so forth. So freely movable. The knee joint and also the elbow joint, they are still movable, not as freely movable as your shoulder joint, but they are still going to be able to move by a flexion and your extension. So synovial joints here are freely movable joints. They have ligaments that will support and strengthen these joints over here. They contain joint capsule. So looking at our figure over here, for example, so this is what I want you to focus on. Okay, so ligaments support and straighten the joints. So here is an example of a ligament right over here. So it is supporting this knee right here medially, right? There's also another ligament over here that is supporting this knee laterally. Okay, so that's what we have right over here. So the joint capsule, this is going to be formed by ligaments that is going to surround the joint. So in here, we will have a joint capsule, although it's not labeled here, but there is going to be another one over here. Okay, that is a joint capsule formed by these ligaments right here, surrounding this joint right over here. Synovial membrane, it will line the joint capsule, so inside it. So think of it as you have the ligament, underneath it you have the joint capsule, and then you have the synovial membrane underneath that. So this synovial membrane over here is very important because they are the one that's going to be secreting the synovial fluid for lubrication. So in here, there's a cavity in here that actually contains the fluid. Okay, uh, which is going to be lubricating this knee right over here. Okay, so that's your example of the synovial membrane secreting synovial fluid for lubrication. The bursae or bursa, singular here, these are fluid-filled sacs that ease friction. So think of it as in this perspective over here. So let's say you have a bone here, right? And then another bone over here. And if there is no separation between these bones, for example, they are now going to. So if this bone is moving this way and this bone is moving this way right over here, they are now going to be rubbing against each other, and then ultimately it will break this bone apart. So what happens here to prevent that from these bones from rubbing against each other is now you have this bone over here. Now think of this as your bursa, and then you have another bone over here. So it's kind of like a ball bearing. Think of it as a ball bearing. So this is now going to allow the sliding motion of these two bones against each other. So fluid-filled sacs that will ease the friction, so that there will be no friction, so that there will be no damage that's going to be created by this two bones right over here. Okay, menisci or meniscus, singular here, C-shaped fibrocartilage that gives stability and absorb shock. So over here we have the meniscus right over here. We have the medial meniscus over here. You have your lateral meniscus right over here, which is now going to provide shock absorber on the knee. So when you're jumping, for example, it actually absorbs the shock between these two bones right over here. So those are some of the structures. So once again, synovial joints. This is the freely movable over joints here, type of joint, and these are the parts of your synovial joints. Next slide here now shows us the different types of movement of our synovial joints. So these are the things that you have actually been doing, I'm pretty sure, but you might not know the exact term that is utilized when you do these actions right over here. So what do I mean by that? So continuing on with the types of synovial joints over here, we have what is called the ball and socket joints. Okay, ball and socket, think about it, you have a ball here and then you have a socket right over here. So remember the glenohumeral, right? So the glenohumeral joint, glenohumeral joint, or the acromioclavicular joint. This is a clavicular joint. This is found between the acromion of the scapula and your clavicle, right? So those are some examples of your synovial joints over here. This is going to allow movement in all planes. So specifically now, the ball and socket is going to allow movement in all planes, even rotational movements. Example here would be a hip joint and your shoulder joint. So hip joint, shoulder joint, right there. Hip joint right there, and your shoulder joint right over there. So an example, the next example here is a hinge joint. This is going to permit movement in only one direction, like the elbow and the knee. So I always like to associate the hinge joint over here like the hinge on a door hinge, right? So when you are opening the door, it will only open to a certain degree, and that is what's happening here with our elbow joint. So here is now an examples here of the different movements. So you have the flexion and extension shown over here. So when you're bowing, that is going to be your flexion. When you are moving your forearm towards you, that is flexion right over there, kind of like when you're in the gym and working on your biceps, right? So that's your flexion over there. And then the opposite is extension, when you are now working on your triceps, or when you are putting your head straight up. So that is your extension over there. And then of course we have it here on the leg as well. So flexion and extension. So joint angle decreases during flexion, joint angle increases during extension. So those are the type of movement via the hinge joints. So the other one over here would be your abduction. So when you say abduction, you're taking something away, right? Abduct. So abduct is to take something away. So abduction, this is abduction of the arm. You're moving the arm away from the body. Okay, you compare that to the adduction. So this one over here, adduction. Adduction, you are now moving the arm towards the body. This one over here is showing you the hand. Okay, you can abduct the hand and you can also adduct the hand. So anything that's moving towards the body, this is your adduction. So you're adding something to it, right? Anything that's moving away from the body, abduct. you are taking something away from it. And you could do that also with your foot over here. So adduction, body parts moves towards the midline. So here is your midline right away. Oh, sorry. Here is your midline right over here. Okay. So body parts that's moving towards the midline. Okay. This is your adduction. Body parts that's moving away from the midline. This is now your abduction. Next movement over here is your rotation. So body part moves around its own axis. So you can see it over here. So this is your rotation, or specifically now your circumduction over here. So body part, so rotation here is body part moves around its own axis. So showing us over here. So when you are moving your arm, for example. Supination over here, now it pertains specifically to the hand. So hand faces anterior or downward. That is your supination. Now if you turn this the other way around, right? So this is now your pronation. So when the hand faces posterior or downwards. Okay, circumduction shown here between the arm and the leg. Body part moves so that a cone shape is actually outlined. So there goes the cone shape right over there. Okay, so special movement with just pertaining to the foot right over here is known as your inversion and your eversion. So inversion, this is the sole of the foot that turns inwards. So turns medially, basically. So the sole of the foot is now facing medially. Compare that to the eversion, sole of the foot is now turned laterally. So here is my question to you guys. So which of these two right here, inversion or eversion, that is most common when you twist your ankle, right? So when you twist your ankle, next time, rather than saying, oh shoot, I just twisted my ankle, you can say like, oh, I just inverted my ankle, right? So that is going to be your inversion right there. All right, continue on here. So this is now going to be talking about the cells of the cells that's pertaining to the bone, and these cells are specifically going to be involved in growth, remodeling, and repair of our bone. So three cells, specific cells that does this specific job here are your osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. So please make sure that you know what they are. So osteoblasts, these are bone forming right over here. So they secrete organic matrix of the bone and promote deposition of calcium salts into the matrix. So osteoblasts, they form the bone. Osteocytes, these are the mature bone here. Okay, so when osteoblast surrounds themselves with calcified matrix, they become osteocytes within the lacuna or lacunae, right? So specifically osteocytes, what I want you to know about the osteocytes is they are going to maintain the bone so that they are going to be functioning at optimum. Osteoclasts, these are the bone absorbing cells. It breaks down the bone, returning the calcium and phosphate to the blood. So if the body needs calcium, for example, and you don't have it in your diet, you're not providing it via the diet, then these cells right over here gets activated so that they can break down the bone and then now return calcium to the body, okay, in the blood specifically. Throughout life, osteoclasts remove the matrix of bones and osteoblasts will build it up. Okay, so another terms that I like to use between the osteoblast and osteoclast here are that your osteoclasts, these are the bone destroying cells. Okay, bone destroying cells. And this one over here, like to refer to them as your bone building right here, bone building cells. Okay, so here is my question to you guys. Of these three cells right over here, 1, 2, and 3, which of these three cells is going to become active? Okay, so active in a person suffering from osteoporosis. Okay, osteoporosis. So osteoporosis. So I want you to know that osteoporosis, this is when the bones become brittle. Okay, so become brittle. So the bones become brittle. So what do you think, okay, is the answer to that? So is it osteoblasts that are active? Is it osteocytes that is active? Or is it osteoclasts that is active here? Okay, and the follow-up question to that is that which one would you want to target So if the bones are becoming brittle, if the bones are being destroyed, which of these cells would pharmaceutical companies will destroy or will target so that its activity is minimized, preventing osteoporosis or slowing down the osteoporosis in this individual. All right, so that is the cells involved in bone growth, remodeling, and repair. Next one here. So, bone development and growth. So, specifically, this is now pertaining to how is bone going to grow. Okay? What is the process of bone growth? What is the process of bone development? So, we have what is known as your ossification or formation of bone. And we have two types here, intramembranous ossification and also endochondral ossification. And I will discuss this more details in our next series of our lecture.